I don't think you ever really know what you'll do in a moment like that. I thought I was a good father, the kind who always shows up, the one who listens when his kids talk. But everything I thought I knew about being a dad, the lessons about protecting, loving, supporting, fell apart in an instant, and I had no idea what kind of man I'd become until it was too late. It was a Monday afternoon. I was sitting in my office at work eating lunch. A simple, typical day, but my phone buzzed and the name flashed across the screen. I clicked it, thinking she just needed help with her math homework or maybe just wanted to tell me about her day. But what I heard on the other end of the line shattered everything I knew. "They're in the bathroom, Dad. They're trying to climb into my stall. I'm so scared." I froze. The words hit me like a freight train. I could hear the panic in her voice, the thin veil of terror barely holding it together. My daughter was being attacked, and it was happening in the school she'd been going to for the past 5 months. The same school I thought was safe. The same school I trusted. Jumped up from my desk, knocking my chair over in my haste to leave. I don't even remember the drive there. My mind was racing, heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. When I pulled up to the school, I sprinted toward the front door, praying I was too late. Sighed, I didn't stop for a second. I didn't pause to sign in. I didn't wait for anyone to question me. I was a man on a mission, and all I could think about was I charged through the hallway, racing up to the third floor where I thought she was. The secretary's voice echoed in my mind as I passed her desk, calling out that I couldn't just run through the building without signing in. I didn't care. I was beyond caring. My daughter was in danger. And they were doing nothing. I arrived at the bathroom door and it was locked. I pressed my ear against it, my heart sinking into my stomach. I could hear sobs, and then the thing I'll never forget, the muffled scream as someone covered her mouth. I yelled her name, threw my shoulder against the door, nothing. The door was reinforced, made to withstand exactly this kind of situation when lives depended on getting in. I grabbed a chair, slammed it against the door, it shattered, the pieces flying in every direction, but the door didn't budge. Everything went quiet for a moment, then I heard the secretary's voice. She was behind me, out of breath. "So you're destroying school property, I'm calling security." I snapped. "Give me the keys," I screamed. Her response was almost robotic, like it was a routine for her to be this detached. "I don't have the keys, sir," she said, almost monotone. "Only the principal has those, and she's on her lunch break." I didn't even know how to respond to that. My daughter, my little girl, was in there, and the only thing they cared about was rules. Rules that didn't mean a thing when a child's life was on the line. I ran to the principal's office, and what I saw next left me with a sickening sense of hopelessness. There she was, sitting at her desk, eating a salad, scrolling through her phone. She saw me, held up her hand, 5 fingers, 5 more minutes, and then went back to eating as if she didn't hear me screaming at her. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't think. Everything inside me wanted to tear that office apart to make her see what she had failed to do. But before I could even get close, the security guard arrived. "Sir," he said, placing a hand on my arm, "you need to calm down." I shoved him off, picked up another chair, and smashed it through the principal's window. Glass exploded everywhere. The principal screamed, dropping her salad. I reached inside, unlocked her door, and stormed past her desk, blood from my hand dripping onto her carpet. But none of that mattered. What mattered was getting to. I didn't know what I was going to do when I got there, but I couldn't stop now. My daughter, my little girl, was somewhere in that bathroom, and she needed me. It didn't start this way. It didn't start with me breaking windows or screaming at the principal. No, it started months before, when first started as a freshman. I'll never forget how excited she was that first day. She had on a brand new outfit, a perfect little smile, her backpack just the right size, was always a little shy but full of ambition. She wanted to do well, make friends, fit in. That was all I ever wanted for her, to be happy and safe. First, everything seemed perfect. I'd drop her off at school every morning, a quick hug, a reminder to have a great day. She'd wave as she walked through the gates, and I'd watch her disappear into the crowd of students. But then came the change, the texts. First, I thought nothing of it. She mentioned a few names, some boys from her class, but I brushed it off. They probably just want to talk to you, I'd say. They're just being friendly. But soon it became clear the boys were following her, watching her, stalking her on her walk home from school, and every time I asked her about it, she would give me the same answer: "It's fine, Dad, it's not a big deal." I believed her. Oh, wouldn't I? She was my daughter, and I trusted her. I trusted that she knew what was best, that she could handle herself. But what I didn't realize, what I couldn't see, was that she was slowly becoming trapped in something far more dangerous than I ever imagined. Those boys were smart, they knew exactly how to get into her head. They'd start with small things, following her home, sending her texts, making comments about how cute she looked, but soon their behavior escalated. I remember one night we were sitting around the dinner table, her mother and me, when's phone buzzed. She glanced down at it and her face turned pale. It was a message from one of the boys. I could see the hesitation in her eyes before she quickly put the phone face down. "What is it?" I asked, trying to sound casual. I could tell something was off, but she just shook her head. "Nothing, Dad, I'm just tired. I'll go to bed early tonight." But I knew there was something she wasn't telling me, and I should push harder, I should ask more questions. But I didn't. The next morning I heard it again. Another text, another excuse, another sigh of frustration. But this time when she walked into the kitchen, she looked different. Her shoulders were slumped, her face was pale, she barely touched her breakfast. "Are you okay?" I asked, my heart sinking. "I'm fine, Dad," she said, but I could tell she was lying. I didn't know it at the time, but the seeds of fear and anxiety had already been planted in her. Those boys weren't just playing around anymore, they were controlling her. And the school, they didn't care, not when she tried to report it, they swept it under the rug every single time. There were moments that should have been red flags for me, the kind of moments where I should have picked up on the tension between and the school, but I was too focused on the surface level, too focused on my job, my life, my own distractions. There was the first time asked to be excused from school early. It was during the middle of the week. I remember it clearly because I was busy preparing for a big presentation, and she was reluctant to tell me why she was feeling so drained. I'm really tired. Can I go home early today?" she asked, barely making eye contact. Thought it was just exhaustion from her first semester of high school, but now I realize it was more than that. It was the anxiety building up, the fear that kept her up at night. Those boys had been sending her texts that made her skin crawl. They told her she'd be sorry if she told anyone. They told her they knew where she lived. They'd been pushing boundaries in ways that I couldn't see, ways that she couldn't explain. I remember telling her that she needed to talk to someone at school about it. The counselor, the teachers, anyone, but was hesitant as always. She didn't want to make a big deal out of it. She didn't want to cause trouble. She didn't want me to think she couldn't handle it on her own. I should pushed harder, I should insisted. I should have been the father who stood in front of her and demanded that someone take this seriously, but I didn't. I trusted that the school would do its part. I trusted that they would help her when she needed it. And that was my mistake. An afternoon a few weeks later came home and said something that still haunts me. She said that the boys had been following her on her walk home from school. They were making comments, joking about things she wasn't comfortable with, but she brushed it off just like she always did. I tried to comfort her, tell her it was probably just harmless teasing, but deep down I knew that it was more than that, it was intimidation. Didn't stop there, came to me one evening and said they'd been waiting for her in the hallways after class. They cornered her by her locker, trapping her for just a few moments, saying things she would never repeat. That was when I started seeing the cracks. That was when I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know how deep it went. The school didn't respond. They told me it was nothing more than boys being boys, that they'd talked to the students involved, and that it was probably just a misunderstanding. I let it go. I told myself they were right, that I was overreacting. But I wasn't overreacting either. A few weeks later, I got another call from his phone. She was frantic. "They're in the bathroom, Dad. They're trying to climb into my stall. Please help. I'm so scared." I couldn't breathe. I was angry. I was scared. I was a father who had failed to see the warning signs. I couldn't believe it had come to this point. I should have acted sooner. I should have fought for my daughter the moment she first came to me with the fear in her eyes. But I didn't. And now she was in there alone, trapped. Could hear her voice cracking on the other end of the phone, the terror in her words there in the bathroom. "They're trying to climb into my stall. I'm so scared," pierced through the haze of my thoughts. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my keys, my thoughts running wild, trying to piece together what had been happening all this time. Why didn't I see this coming? Why didn't I act sooner? I didn't wait. I didn't stop for anything. I barely registered the drive to the school, but I remember the adrenaline surging through me like a river, pushing me to go faster, do more, anything to get there before it was too late. The entire time I drove, I kept calling the school's main office. No answer. I called the principal's office. No answer. I tried the security desk. Silence. My heart sank as the seconds stretched into minutes. Text had slowed down 4 minutes since the last message. "God, please let her be okay, please." I barely parked my car. The engine was still running when I jumped out, slamming the door and running toward the school's front entrance. There was a school secretary behind the desk as I rushed inside. She looked up briefly but didn't move. Her disinterested eyes met mine. I didn't stop. I didn't care about her protocols or the fact that I didn't sign in. My daughter was in there. I couldn't waste a single second. "It's in the bathroom. 3 boys are trying to climb into her stall. I need to get in there now," I said, my voice sharp with panic. She blinked at me, her response coming so slowly it made me feel like I was speaking to a robot. "Sir, you'll need to sign in first." "I don't care about signing in," I interrupted, already heading for the stairs. "Where's the third floor bathroom?" The secretary barely looked up from her computer. "Upstairs, sir, third floor." "Get someone to unlock the door now," I demanded, barely registering her words as I sprinted past her, taking the stairs 2 at a time. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. Isn't there? She's in danger. I burst onto the third floor and made a beeline for the bathrooms, my heart pounding in my chest with every step. And then I saw at the bathroom door it was locked. Sense of dread spread through me like ice water. I couldn't wait anymore. My legs moved on their own, charging toward the door. I pressed my ear against the metal surface and I could hear her. Her sobs, soft at first, but then suddenly the strangled sound of someone muffling her scream. It hit me like a slap to the face. I shouted, banging on the door, my voice desperate, pleadings, "I'm here." But nothing happened. I didn't hear her anymore. The silence was worse than any sound. My blood ran cold as I realized that the last thing I had heard from her was that muffled scream. I had to get in there was no other option. I slammed my shoulder into the door, it barely budged. The reinforced steel frame was meant to protect students, but all it did was keep me from getting to my daughter. I yelled again, my hands now clawing at the door frame, desperate to find a way through. "I'm coming, just hold on." I grabbed the nearest chair from the hallway and swung it with all my strength at the door. The chair shattered into pieces, but the door didn't even shake. "Why won't this door break? Why won't they come help me?" My head was spinning, every second felt like an eternity. My daughter was in there, my little girl, and all I could do was stand there, helpless. Didn't know what else to do, so I grabbed a fire extinguisher off the wall. The heavy metal canister felt like my only weapon, my only chance to break through. I smashed it against the lock mechanism, over and over again and again, each strike feeling like it might be the one to free her. But the door didn't yield, it just stood there solid, unmovable. And then, like a distant echo, I heard someone behind me, the secretary. She had made her way up the stairs. "Sir, stop," she called out, panting and wide-eyed, as if she was more concerned about the door than the fact that my daughter was inside, being attacked. "You're destroying school property, I'm calling security." "Security?" I thought. "Security." I spun around, fear surging through me. "Get me the keys," I screamed, "now." The secretary shook her head, her voice calm, detached, like she was just reading lines off a script. "I don't have the keys, sir. Only the principal has them. She's on her lunch break." Lunch break? Everything inside me snapped. I couldn't believe this. I was standing here, losing my mind, and the principal was eating her lunch. "Are you kidding me?" I shouted, feeling a cold, hollow rage build inside me. "My daughter's in there being attacked, and you're telling me the principal is on lunch? She's in there, and you're telling me that's more important than my child's safety." The secretary just stood there, blinking at me as if I was the one in the wrong. I ran toward the principal's office, not caring anymore, not caring about the rules, the procedures, or anything else. I found her there at her desk, eating a salad and scrolling on her phone. She didn't even look up when I barged in. She didn't even blink when I pounded on her door, the glass in the window rattling. "What are you doing?" I demanded, my voice shaking with rage. "My daughter is in the bathroom right now. 3 boys are trying to climb into her stall. You need to help her. You need to do something." She looked up slowly, held up 5 fingers, 5 minutes, as if that mattered. She mouthed 5 more minutes, and then without another word went back to scrolling on her phone like I wasn't even there. Couldn't breathe. My whole body felt like it was vibrating with anger, with frustration. The moment I saw her ignore me, I knew that I had been betrayed by the very system that was supposed to protect my daughter. I didn't care anymore. I didn't care about the rules. I didn't care about the consequences. I just needed to get to her. I picked up the nearest chair, lifted it above my head, and swung it through her office window with all the force I had left in me. The glass shattered into 1,000 pieces, the sound of it exploding into the air a strange sort of relief. Her scream was sharp, and she dropped her salad in a panic. I reached through the broken window and unlocked her office door, my hand bleeding from the glass shards. "Give me the keys," I yelled, shaking with rage and desperation. The principal shrank back, but I didn't care anymore. I wasn't asking, I wasn't pleading, I wasn't waiting, I was taking the keys. She screamed something at me, threatened to call security. But by the time she finished talking, I had already found the principal's voice was a blur, her protest swallowed by the noise of my blood rushing through my ears. I didn't stop. My hands shook as I held the cold metal pressed against my palm, and the weight of it felt wrong in my hand. It was the same the principal carried every day, the one that gave her control over everything that was supposed to protect the students, but right now, it felt like a weapon I had to use to save my daughter. I didn't think about anything else. I didn't think about the consequences, the rules, the people watching me. The only thing that mattered was. I sprinted back toward the bathroom, my heart pounding so loudly I thought it might burst out of my chest. Every step felt like a million miles. Every moment a lifetime. My hands were slick with sweat, but the key was steady in my grasp, the promise of getting to her so close I could taste it. The door was still locked. I had no patience left. My mind, too focused on the desperation of the moment, knew only one thing: I had to get through this door. I jammed the key into the lock, turning it with force. There was a satisfying click, and the door swung open. What I saw inside is something I'll never forget. It's burned into my memory, a scene that plays over and over in my mind. My beautiful daughter curled up on the cold bathroom floor, her face pale, tears streaking down her cheeks. Her skirt was torn, her blouse was half untucked, and there was a look in her eyes that I never want to see again: fear, confusion, and shame. Three boys, they were standing by the sink, frozen in place, their eyes wide with a mix of guilt and anger. The sight of them made my blood boil. I didn't care who they were anymore. I didn't care about their excuses or their reasons. I only cared about getting to and getting her out of there. I rushed toward her, my feet echoing in the silence of the bathroom. Baby, I'm here, I said, my voice breaking. I crouched down beside her, my arms wrapping around her fragile frame, pulling her to me. She trembled in my arms, her body shaking so violently I feared she might break apart. The sound of her sobbing, broken and desperate, crushed me from the inside out. Dad, she whispered between sobs, her voice barely audible. I couldn't stop them. I held her, I didn't have the words. How do you tell your daughter that she's not at fault when the world around her has failed her so completely? How do you explain that the people who should have protected her school, her teachers, the principal, didn't care enough to act until it was too late? I heard one of the boys speak up, his voice shaky. We didn't mean. Shut up, I roared, standing up and turning to face them, my fists clenched at my sides. You don't get to explain yourself, you've done enough damage. Their faces were a mixture of shame and defiance, but none of it mattered. Not anymore. Nothing they said could change what had just happened. I grabbed my phone from my pocket, hands still trembling. I dialed 911, knowing there was no other option. This wasn't just a schoolyard fight. This wasn't just kids messing around. This was assault. But as the phone rang, I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching, slow, deliberate. I turned, and there, standing in the doorway, was the principal. Her face was a mask of anger, eyes flashing with something between panic and irritation. She looked at me, and then it curled up in my arms. But it was the way she spoke that made my blood run cold. Sir, she said, her voice calm but laced with venom, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises. You've broken school property, and your behavior is out of control. Out of control. I couldn't believe it. I was holding my daughter who had just been assaulted in a bathroom, and she was concerned about property damage. Her words hit me like a slap in the face. The injustice of it all, the coldness in her voice. It was as if she couldn't even see what was really happening. I was a father who was trying to save his daughter, and she was treating me like a criminal. You're going to have to leave now, the principal repeated, her voice more insistent. I'll be calling security, and if you don't leave, we'll have to call the police. I didn't care, not anymore. Call them, I spat. Call whoever you want. My daughter is hurt. She's hurt, and I'm not leaving without her. Her gaze flickered too, but it didn't seem to register. Her eyes were cold, calculating, like she was more worried about the inconvenience to her than the fact that a child had just been assaulted in her school. Sir, you need to calm down, the principal said, her voice dripping with condescension. You're making things worse. You're causing a scene. We'll handle this. Handle this? I looked down at, still trembling in my arms, her face buried in my chest. I had no more patience left, no more words. Before I could say anything, I heard the sound of a siren in the distance, growing louder with every passing second. The police were coming. The principal's eyes widened, and she backed away, her face paling. I didn't care what she was thinking. I didn't care about her plans or her version of what had happened. I had my daughter, and that was all that mattered. The police arrived a few minutes later, their voices filling the hallway, ordering people to step back, but none of them came near us. They went straight to the three boys who were still standing there, looking like deer caught in headlights. I knew deep down that nothing would be the same again. The fight wasn't just about me versus the school anymore. It was about making sure his voice was heard. It was about justice. But as the officers questioned the boys and took statements, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much bigger than I could have ever imagined. I didn't know it then, but the fight for my daughter's safety, for her future, would be a long and hard one. And the worst part was, I could already see the cracks in the system, cracks that would only get bigger the more I tried to expose them. The school wasn't going to let this go quietly. And neither was I. The sound of slavered breathing was all I could hear as we left the school. The police had arrived, but I barely noticed them. I barely noticed anything except for the tremor in my daughter's voice, the way she clung to me as if I were the only thing keeping her tethered to reality. She hadn't spoken much since we left the bathroom, and that silence felt like a weight pressing down on my chest. The drive to the hospital was agonizing. Every second felt like a year. Was curled up in the passenger seat, her face hidden behind her hands, and I couldn't help but feel this overwhelming sense of failure. As her father, I should protected her. I should seen it coming, but I hadn't. I had been too blinded by trust in the school, trust in the system, trust in people who had no interest in protecting her at all. Parked in the hospital lot, the fluorescent lights flickering overhead, and rushed inside. The sterile smell of antiseptic filled the air as we approached the emergency room, the overwhelming sense of fear making everything feel distant and unreal. Nurse met us at the door, guiding us to a room immediately. I tried to speak to, but she was barely responsive, her eyes dull, her head hanging low. I kept repeating her name, whispering it under my breath like it might break through whatever haze was clouding her mind. When we finally reached the exam room, a doctor came in, his face kind but distant. He introduced himself, but I barely heard his words. I was too focused on watching her flinch every time someone moved too quickly. Can I have a moment with my daughter? I asked, my voice rough from holding back tears. The doctor nodded, stepping out of the room, and the door clicked shut behind him. It was just the two of us now, and I took a deep breath, kneeling in front of. Her face was pale, streaked with tears, but there was a fragility in her eyes that made my heart shatter. I whispered softly, brushing her hair away from her face. It's going to be okay. I'm here, baby. I'm not going anywhere. We're going to get through this together, okay? Her voice was barely audible as she spoke, the words trembling in the air between us. Dad, I am scared. I don't know what to do. They hurt me. I closed my eyes for a moment, swallowing hard against the lump in my throat. The guilt hit me like a wave. I should been there. I should known. I should seen the signs and done something before it came to this. But the truth was I had failed her. I had failed as a father. I know, baby, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I know, but we're going to make sure they can't hurt you anymore. You're not alone. I'm going to make sure you're safe. The doctor returned shortly after, guiding through the necessary procedures. They took her vitals, asked her a million questions, none of which she could answer without breaking down. Each question was a reminder of what had happened, a reminder of the trauma she had just endured. The worst moment came when they asked her to remove her clothes for the exam. She hesitated, her body trembling, and I could see the fear in her eyes as she looked at me. My heart broke. I stepped forward, holding her hand tightly, trying to provide some comfort in a situation where there was none. They're going to take good care of you, I told her. You're brave, you hear me, you're the strongest person I know. The nurse guided us into the exam room, and I stood by her side the entire time, watching as they conducted their examination, taking notes, photographs, and evidence. Flinch every time they touched her, and I could feel the anxiety building in the room. I wanted to scream, to fight for her, to demand justice for what had been done. But for now, all I could do was hold her hand. Hours later, when the examination was over, the doctor sat us down in a quiet room. The sterile white walls, the sharp smell of antiseptic, and the soft hum of fluorescent lights made everything feel even more surreal. The results from the exam are in, the doctor began, his voice calm but serious. There's clear physical evidence of trauma, bruising, scratches, and other injuries. I'm going to make sure this information is documented. This is important, sir. It's evidence. It can help with the investigation. I nodded numbly, trying to digest the gravity of the situation. The tears welled up in my eyes, but I held them back, trying to remain strong for her. She's strong, the doctor continued, but this kind of thing, it's going to take time to process. She's going to need counseling, support, a lot of help. This is going to be a long road for both of you. Is she going to be okay? I asked, my voice breaking. The doctor's face softened. Physically, she will heal, but emotionally, it's going to be a different kind of journey. She's going to need therapy, support, and time. Looked at who was curled into herself in the corner of the room. Her eyes were vacant, far away, as if she had already retreated into herself. She was no longer the girl I dropped off at school months ago. That girl full of life, hope, and promise had been replaced by someone smaller, someone quieter, someone who had been broken by the very system that was supposed to protect her. After we left the hospital, we went home. It was a hollow, silent drive. When we pulled into the driveway, I could see the house looming ahead, familiar and cold. Didn't say much on the way inside. She just walked in like a ghost, dragging her feet, her head down. She went straight to her room, and I didn't try to stop her. I knew she needed space. She needed time. But I couldn't just leave her alone with the weight of all this. I had to do something. I had to make sure she knew she wasn't alone in this fight. I couldn't undo what had happened, but I could make sure she never felt like she was fighting this battle by herself. I sat in the kitchen, my hands shaking as I scrolled through my phone, the screen lighting up with missed calls, messages, and emails from the school. I ignored them. For now, nothing mattered, but the evidence from the hospital, her medical records, the photographs, the detailed notes was solid. It was undeniable. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This wasn't just boys being boys. This was assault, and I would make sure everyone involved would be held accountable. I had to make sure of it for me, for our family. The silence in our house was deafening. Every creak of the floorboards, every tick of the clock on the wall felt like an intrusion on a reality that was completely different from what it had been before. Was locked in her room, her door closed, her world shut away from mine, and I knew I couldn't fix it. I couldn't make it better. I could only try to make it right. Sat at the kitchen table, my head in my hands, staring at the pile of documents before me, hospital records, police reports, witness statements. Each page was a cold reminder of everything we'd been through. But what weighed on me more than anything else was the thought that the system, the very people who were supposed to protect my daughter, had failed her at every turn. School had ignored her pleas. They had brushed off her reports, telling me it was just boys being boys, dismissing her fears as if they were nothing more than teenage drama. And now I was facing the reality that the fight for justice was going to be long and complicated, full of red tape, legal battles, and worst of all, disloyalty. The phone rang, breaking the quiet. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway, hoping for something, anything that could move this forward. Hello, Mr. Clarks. The voice on the other end was calm, but I could hear the tension in the words. This is Detective. I'm handling your daughter's case. I've gathered some new evidence. I sat up straight, my heart beating faster. New evidence? What do you mean? My voice was tight, filled with both hope and fear. I've interviewed the three boys, she continued, and their stories are all inconsistent. They're not matching up. The thing is, there's more than just their testimony. There's security footage from the school's cameras near the bathroom, and we've been able to piece together a timeline of events. The principal and staff were aware of what was happening, but they didn't take action. They were aware of the threat before it even escalated, but no one intervened. I froze, my mind was reeling, trying to make sense of it. You mean they knew? They knew what was going on, and they still did nothing. Yes, Mr. Clarks, detective said. The principal, the secretary, when your daughter was in danger, they failed her. There's no getting around it. I felt a cold fury rise in me, suffocating my chest. The realization of how deep the betrayal ran, it was suffocating. The school wasn't just negligent, they were complicit. I could feel the anger building inside me, a fire that I could barely contain. But at the same time, there was a small flicker of relief. At least now there was proof. At least now I was fighting this alone. I'm going to need you to come in for a follow-up, detective said, her voice steady. We're building a case, but I need all the information you have, including anything you've received from the school, emails, records, anything. I'll be there, I replied, my voice tight with the weight of everything happening. But I need to know, detective, are they going to be held accountable? The boys, the school, will they face justice? There was a pause on the other end. We're doing everything we can. It's going to take time, but we're committed to this. For your daughter's sake, we're going to make sure the truth comes out. I hung up, but the weight of the conversation lingered. The truth had started to surface, but it was far from over. The path ahead would be a battle, a fight against not just the boys who hurt my daughter, but against a system that protected them, that ignored her suffering. Later that afternoon, I called some other Jennifer. I had put off telling her what had happened at the school, hoping that somehow we could keep things normal for just a little longer, but the truth had to come out. The guilt of keeping it from her had become unbearable. Didn't we need to talk? I said, trying to keep my voice calm but failing miserably. What's going on, Mark? You're scaring me. Her voice was sharp, but I could hear the concern beneath it. I took a deep breath. I had to do this for all of us. The boys, the ones who've been following, they hurt her. They attacked her in the bathroom today. The school, the principal knew it was happening and they didn't do anything. I heard her gasp, the air escaping her in a rush of disbelief. What do you mean they knew? How is that even possible? I explained everything, the texts, the harassment, the school's refusal to intervene, and the betrayal I was starting to feel from the very people who were supposed to protect our daughter. We have evidence now, I said. The police are investigating, but it's going to be a long process. I'm not going to let this go. I'm not going to let suffer through this and have nothing happen. They will face justice, Jen, I promise you. There was silence on the other end of the line. I could almost feel her weighing the options, the possibility that this could go from being a nightmare to something worse, to a battle neither of us were prepared for, but after a long moment she spoke. I believe you, she said, her voice soft but resolute. We'll do this together. We'll make sure knows she's not alone in this. The relief I felt in that moment was immediate, though I knew the real fight had only just begun. I wasn't going to let this go, not for myself, not for anyone else. The next day, the detective called me again. This time her voice was more urgent. Mr. Clarks, I need to let you know something else. One of the custodians at the school came forward. He said he saw the boys with keys they shouldn't have had. He didn't want to get involved, but he said the boys had access to places they weren't supposed to, including the bathrooms. It's crucial information. Wait, what? They had keys to the bathroom? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was bigger than just a case of negligence. It was a deliberate cover-up. Why didn't the school do anything? I don't know yet, the detective said, but this could be a game changer. We have to move quickly. I felt like the walls were closing in on me. The anger surged again, but this time it was sharper, more focused. The school had enabled this behavior. They had given these boys the keys to their power. I had always known that wasn't the only one who had been hurt by the system, by the school that had failed her so badly, but now it was clear the school had failed everyone and they would have to face the consequences. As I sat there processing everything, I realized something else. My loyalty wasn't to the school, it wasn't to the people who had ignored suffering for so long. My loyalty was to her, to my daughter, and as long as I had breath in my lungs, I wasn't going to let this go. That night after I'd gone to bed, I sat in the quiet of our living room, the weight of the day settling over me like a blanket. But the phone call that came next made my heart stop. It was from the principal. I know we've had our differences, Mr. Clarks, she said, her voice too calm, too calculated, but I think we should meet. There's something you need to understand about the situation. I almost laughed, but I didn't. Instead, I gripped the phone tightly, my knuckles turning white. Understand this, I said, my voice low and steady. Your time is running out. You're going to answer for what you did, all of you. And with that, I hung up. There was no more negotiating, no more pretending. The battle was on, and this time I wasn't going to lose. Next few weeks passed in a blur. Every day felt like a new battle, and every battle felt like it dragged me deeper into a fight I never thought I'd be a part of. But at the same time, there was a strange clarity in it. The truth had come out slowly, piece by piece, and the weight of it was overwhelming, but with that truth came a sense of purpose. I had to keep going, not just for me, but for her. She deserved to feel safe again. She deserved to have her voice heard, even if the world around us tried to silence her. The day after my conversation with the principal, I met with Detective. She laid out the full extent of the investigation, the pieces that had finally come together. Security footage showed the three boys entering the bathroom with the keys they shouldn't have had. There was clear evidence of them moving around, talking to each other, waiting for her to walk in. They'd been playing this. The school knew about their behavior before that day and had done nothing. There were emails between the principal and faculty where they discussed previous complaints of harassment, but instead of intervening, they chose to ignore it. Boys will be boys, they said. The same excuse they had used every time spoke up. The principal, along with the secretary, was placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. The school district had no choice but to acknowledge their failure, and they began the process of a full review of their policies. But what I learned that day from Detective didn't give me the satisfaction I was expecting. The reality was the system wasn't built to protect children like. The whole system was designed to protect itself. And even though the district was now taking action, there were still cracks in the foundation, cracks that would take years to heal. Still, it was progress, and progress meant that this wasn't in vain. I wasn't in this alone anymore. The real battle, though, was what came after. Healing didn't come in the form of quick fixes or easy answers. It came in the form of days that felt like they would never end. The therapy sessions, the quiet evenings, the moments when I looked at her and wondered if she would ever feel whole again. We started therapy a few days after the incident. I went with her to the first session. The therapist, Green, was soft-spoken and kind. She knew how to help kids navigate trauma without pushing too hard. She never forced to talk, never rushed her through the process, and in time began to trust her. I sat in the waiting room during most of the sessions, reading, checking my phone, but always half listening to the low hum of conversations from inside. It was hard watching her struggle, but in the moments between the therapy sessions, I noticed small changes, slight improvements that weren't immediately noticeable but mattered deeply. She started sleeping more. Slowly, the nightmares began to subside, though they never fully went away. Her face was less hollow, her eyes less empty. It was like she was slowly relearning how to breathe again, how to live again without the fear that had been suffocating her. One evening, a few weeks after the incident, I made dinner for the two of us. It had become a bit of a ritual. Would sit at the kitchen table, her favorite blanket wrapped around her like a shield while I cooked. We didn't talk much about what had happened, not right away. There was no rush. But that evening, as I set down a plate of spaghetti in front of her, she looked up at me, a small, cautious smile on her lips. I'm starting to feel a little better, she said, her voice quiet but firm. My heart leaped in my chest. I didn't know how to respond at first. That's really good to hear, I finally said, trying to keep my voice steady. We're getting there step by step. I think I can go back to school soon, she added, her voice tentative, but the spark in her eyes made my throat tighten. Just maybe not full-time yet. That was the moment I knew we were going to make it through this. I didn't know how long it would take or what the road ahead would look like, but I knew that was on her way to healing, and that, at least, was enough for now. Next step was navigating the legal side of things. It was messy, complicated, and painful. The boys had been removed from campus temporarily, but their lawyers were fighting the charges every step of the way. They were trying to claim that had invited them in, that the whole thing was a misunderstanding. One of the boys had even said in his initial statement that the whole thing was consensual. But Detective had already gathered enough evidence to prove otherwise, and we weren't backing down. The legal system, though, was a different kind of fight. We went at court a few weeks later, and I remember sitting there watching the defense attorney twist every word, trying to paint my daughter as the one at fault. They tried to discredit her testimony to suggest she was lying about what had happened, to make it seem like it was her fault for leading them on. Its voice never wavered. She spoke the truth even when it hurt. She told them what happened in that bathroom, how she had begged them to stop, how she had tried to fight back, how she had felt so alone. And every word she spoke was backed up by the evidence we had: photos, medical reports, security footage. In the end, the case was settled with the boys facing criminal charges for their actions. Two of them, the ones directly involved in the assault, were sent to juvenile court, while the third, who had tried to deny everything, was placed on probation and sent to counseling. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't a clean win, but it was justice, and for now, that had to be enough. Months passed, went back to school part-time with a quiet room available if she needed to leave and an adult escort to make sure she wasn't alone in the hallways. The school had implemented new safety measures, and the principal, after being put on administrative leave, was reassigned to a different position far away from students. It wasn't enough, but it was something. The school had learned too late, but they had learned. And I continued our therapy sessions. She was getting stronger, learning to cope with what had happened step by step, but there were days when she would go quiet, days when I could see the fear in her eyes and feel the weight of everything she had gone through. It was going to take time for the scars to heal, both on the inside and out. As for me, I realized something as I sat with her in that quiet room, waiting for another therapy session to begin. The thing that had broken me, that had broken both of us, had also been the thing that made us stronger. I had learned what it truly meant to protect my daughter, to fight for her. And I had learned in the end that love, real love, wasn't about the big moments. It was about the quiet, everyday decisions, to stay by her side, to listen when she needed to talk, to be there when she was ready to heal. The battle wasn't over, it would never truly be over, but we were moving forward together. And that's what I want to leave you with. No matter what life throws at you, no matter how much the world tells you to stay silent, never stop fighting for the ones you love. You don't know what you're capable of until you're faced with the impossible, but if you hold on to your truth and the people who matter most to you, there's nothing that can stop you. Thank you for taking this journey with me. I've learned that sometimes the hardest thing is to keep going, but if you do, you'll find strength you never knew you had. Oh, here's my question for you. What would you do for the ones you love when everything seems lost? Share your thoughts with me in the comments. And if you've made it this far, thank you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. We've all got a fight in us. Let's keep fighting for our families, for ourselves, for the truth.